Dungeons and Dragons is both the absolute best and the absolute worst board game ever. Now, before you get too angry, I know that D&D is not a board game, but hear me out. Board games have been trying to emulate D&D for decades, but in the last decade or so, there's been a greater and greater push to approach what playing a tabletop role-playing game is like. Story-filled campaign games that give players the ability to play as a character in a world to be explored. And in all honesty, games are getting better and better at it. Oathsworn has an engaging, well-written story that sucks you into the world and adds a meaning and depth to every encounter. Gloomhaven or Frosthaven and Too Many Bones have such distinct characters that play so radically different from each other, you really feel that your character is unique and brings something completely different to the table than everyone else. ISS Vanguard lets you explore and discover distant alien planets and systems better than any Star Trek game that's come before. Kingdom Death Monster and Aeon Trespass Odyssey, brutal and dark campaign games that give real permanent stakes to combat, making players invested in the outcome. But no matter how well a board game tries to emulate the experience of a tabletop role-playing game like Dungeons and Dragons, it will inevitably fall short of the Grandmaster itself, and in some ways, transcend and surpass the original inspiration. I'm Man-Seeking Meeple. Sit back and let me tell you a little bit about my personal history with D&D and why it is the best and worst board game of all time. My experience with Dungeons and Dragons actually started quite late in life. As both a self-proclaimed nerd and an often ridiculed one as well, I spent my life reading fantasy novels, reading rule books to upcoming games just for the fun of it, delving into science fiction worlds, learning all the lyrics to my favorite musicals, embracing dramatic arts. I'm a nerd through and through. But due to the stigma that's existed against D&D, I always thought that D&D was, too nerdy for me. But now, that's not for the lack of others trying. I'd been told about how I would love D&D for years by so many different people. But it wasn't until a good friend of mine, about a month before their birthday, discussed how he wanted to play D&D for his birthday. And so, as a partial present to him, I decided to learn the game. So the next day, I went and bought the rule book and proceeded to read it. Whew, yikes. All 320 pages. Picking up the book, I questioned what I had gotten into, but I was committed. Like any board game, I wanted to understand the ins and outs of everything one could do, so I read through the whole thing, only to really come to the conclusion that the game was ultimately about rolling a die to see what happens. To say that my board gaming brain was not impressed with my initial read is an understatement. The game seemed too random, too swingy, too chaotic to be fun or meaningful. But I did like the idea of creating a character. So, meet Seraphiel, the prodigy divination wizard. I wrote a whole backstory, the backstory to my parents, which was left as a mystery even to myself, my father a noble knight, my mother a fallen angel, my magic which led to the tragic death of my family, which death led to the guilt, and guilt turned into obsession, and obsession to find a way to turn back time and correct my wrongs. I was willing to sacrifice anything and everything for the guilt I held onto in my heart demanded recompense. I had so much fun writing, imagining, and then choosing a class, race, and spells and subclass that would all fit into the character that I birthed, but I was still a little hesitant to see how the game would actually play out. Finally, arrived the day of the big birthday shindig. I sat around a table with a few close friends and introduced myself as a wizard, and met their incredibly distinct personalities and characters. Our first adventure was a simple introduction, the mines of Phendelver. Goblins ambushed us, a ragtag group of individuals whose journeys had led them to work under the employ of a wealthy benefactor. It was a very simple, standard, cliche fantasy setting. Nothing revelatory really happened in the plot. The game. I fell in love with Seraphiel and the other characters. I really did. I had the pleasure to meet Reginald, the noble pacifist who would beg for parley to an angry lion as it devoured him. But the moment he would bleed, a blinding rage would turn him into a violent berserker with no memory of what he had done. I laughed at our druid, Claire, who was obsessed with rebirth, found everywhere in nature, and as a result, wanted everything to burn, so to give it a chance to be reborn. Elandril, the Wood Elf Cleric, Aldwin, the Hexblade Warlock. That first group of adventurers became fast friends, friends that I felt a far deeper attachment to than any character I'd ever played in any board game before. And as time went on, we played more and more, those attachments only deepened. I'll never forget the moment when Reggie lay unconscious at the head of an army of angry orcs who were mere steps away. The party had an opportunity to teleport away in an instant. We all could leave, and we had to make our decision without discussing with others. I knew that to stay would be certain death for Seraphiel, but leaving meant Reggie would be abandoned. So I did the unthinkable. I stayed, knowing that it would be my death. But the dice smiled on me that day. Every attempt to hide, to hold out was a miraculous success, and I survived. And I had saved my friend who helped me believe in others, who gave Seraphiel real character growth. These events made me feel like a hero. And that's what D&D does. It offers story, growth, attachment, emotion. It allows you to make genuine sacrifices and give up something you really care about. And the stories that are told are not those found in a book or laid out in a manual. They're made by the players at the table in the heat of the moment. They are the result of being able to do or say anything, really anything. Every problem demands a solution, and the players can be as creative as they would like, for the possibilities are infinite. A board game, or even a book or movie or video game, they can only have so many options available to the player. Choose option A or B, left or right, good or bad. Life is made up of a million tiny decisions. Life has unseen consequences. What words do you say? What tone do you use? What's your body language communicating? And what does the random chance of a 20-sided die have to say about your efforts? In D&D, the object of the game isn't to win. It's to play. It's why failure can be just as fun as success. Tripping over your own feet, getting caught in a lie, these build moments that create memories and humor. These bring fun. Seraphiel's first heroic moment was to disguise himself as a goblin, sneak into a goblin cave, round up all the goblins, and burn them all in one foul swoop. But immediately after this, he turned around, tripped, and fell into a river and needed rescuing. That random chaos of a die roll just leads to more creative problem solving, more story moments, more laughter, more risk, more game. In a board game, failure results in loss. D&D or tabletop RPGs really do offer a completely different experience to that of board games. One where you can create your own story with infinite possibilities, where you become a character and you explore a living, breathing world that changes and reacts to what you do, as unique and customizable as you are yourself, where problems demand creativity and innovation, one where you are emotionally attached to characters in the world around you, where what's at stake actually matters to you, one where failure is a feature, not a punishment, where friendships are deepened and you get to know the people around the table on a much deeper level. Honestly, in a lot of ways, playing D&D reminds me of doing improv and drama more than playing a game. It's full of laughter. It's all about interacting with those around you. It's creative. It's about imagination and just saying yes and going with it. But I did say that D&D was both the best and the worst board game of all time. D&D isn't perfect, and its blemishes can manifest themselves flagrantly to an avid board gamer. Remember how I mentioned there were infinite possibilities and a depth of character customization? Well, the problem is that permeates everything in D&D, including its combat, which is a real pillar of the game. And in combat, you can do anything. The options open to you are so incredibly vast and customizable, but that means on your turn, you have to ponder infinite possibilities. And don't forget, you are far more likely to care about the outcome in D&D than just a typical board game. You're emotionally invested. And to a board gamer, this can all lead to what we like to call analysis paralysis. But more than that, combat just slows down to a crawl. With the stricter structure of board games, players can focus on balance and tactics. Good games are streamlined to only include the most meaningful decisions while retaining the essence of fun and difficult decision-making. D&D? Well, it's kind of the opposite of streamlined. It isn't pared down to only include what works and flows smoothly, it allows anything. And that makes combat, well, frankly, unwieldy, sluggish, and can be unengaging, and don't forget, completely random. Now, that randomness can lead to great story moments, but not necessarily incredible tactics. If a board gamer was looking for the most amazing combat in a tactics-filled game, D&D would quite possibly be the last recommendation that I give. It's a stark contrast to how simple the rule set is outside of combat. When speaking to someone, instead of looking something up in the rules, a player can just say what they want to say. And if it needs be, the DM can ask them to roll a d20 and see how successful they are. The rules just disappear into the background, and what one is left with is just the role play experience. Combat? Combat is a strict mental juggling act where every rule, ability, and option are considered carefully, all for the rules to be determined by the flick of a die. This lets the restricted nature of board games to far exceed the quality of tactics and strategy that can be found in D&D. Not the creativity or the immersion, mind you. I think D&D is the worst board game, at least in this one way. Plus, it also requires a dungeon master with a huge level of commitment to run a game. Sessions generally are long, and games are played over years rather than just months or even a day. It can really be group dependent. Look, Dungeons and Dragons isn't trying to be a board game. It's trying to be a role-playing game where you embody a role and live through its emotions and excitement, and danger and loss and sacrifice. It's trying to be something so much more. No. D&D isn't trying to be a board game, even though board games are certainly trying to be Dungeons and Dragons. In some ways, I'm so grateful to have such amazing board games that let me discover new mechanisms. But just because D&D has flaws doesn't mean it's not worth playing. Nothing comes close to the experience of a tabletop RPG. And if you've been intimidated, I don't know if there's ever been a better time to jump into the hobby than now. I strongly encourage you to look at your friendly local game store or online, get out of your shell, and try out what is playing a TTRPG. You might just discover that D&D is different from board games, but in some ways, it far exceeds them. Yeah, I guess it really is the best and worst game. Thanks. Now, if you have any great experiences with D&D, I want to hear them in the comments, or if there are other TTRPGs that you really love, let me know. I kind of use Dungeons and Dragons as a quick summary, catch-all in this, but you can see that I do have quite an affinity for D&D that I've been playing over the years now. I'd love to hear, and I really do appreciate you coming to listen. I'm Man Seeking People, and have a great day.